When hope is gone, undo this lock and send me forth on a moonlit walk. Release restraint level 0. Hey kids, wanna see a dead body?
Hi guys, this is the Void of the Ravenclaw. Welcome back to another fanfiction story. If you like this type of content, smash the like button and subscribe for future videos and updates that I do post on my community tab frequently. If you want to get access to any of my early content, check out the Discord. This is the second Chance of Life, Part 2, Death and Rebirth. Let's continue where we last left off in our story. After the corpse was concealed, Rose took the long way around the dome greenhouse. But before she left, she took the Russian's AK-47 and made sure the rifle wasn't jammed, and made sure there was plenty of ammo in the magazine. Before Rose could move any further, she heard footsteps, so she immediately hid behind another eclipse flower and hid behind the large trunk of the flower. She allowed them to pass. That's not to draw any more attention to myself than I already have. Rose approached and swiped her keycard at the emergency exit of the greenhouse dome. Immediately Rose could see the new Russian soldiers executing everyone, scientists and soldier alike. Meanwhile, Vicky was in her office. She could hear multiple gunshots as she looked out the little window of her office to see everyone being gunned down, being executed by unrecognizable, unfamiliar Russian soldiers wearing different type of military gear and uniforms. Vicky exited her office. Vicky only knows of one place that would be safe enough, and that would be Rose's laboratory. Despite how scared, shitless she is, she's focused on her singular task, getting to Rose's laboratory to get some sort of safety so she could figure out what exactly is going on. But she managed to get attention of one of the hostile Russian soldiers. They immediately tried to open fire. Vicky felt a sharp pain as the bullet grazed the side of her shoulder. When she couldn't run anymore, she collapsed to the ground as she twisted her ankle a little bit, as the soldier that was shooting at her was walking up towards her with his rifle aimed right at her head. Before the soldier could do anything else, Rose appeared by turning a corner of one of the buildings and swiftly unclipped the soldier's handgun and pulled it out of his holster and placed the gun on the side of his head. Without no hesitation, Rose pulled the trigger as a bullet flew out of the other side of the man's skull as he falls dead to the ground. As the side of Rose's face was covered in blood, she immediately begins to take all of the spare ammo and took Vicky by the hand and led her to her lab. She immediately initiated lockdown on her lab. as the energy shield begins to emanate from all of the entryways of the laboratory that she knows of. Instantly, security footage started to appear on the screens of the monitors and TV in the laboratory. I don't understand. Why are they doing this? We were coordinated. We were cooperating with their government. I don't know what's going on either, but this is not a simple disagreement. This is an eradication. But why? They will benefit as much as we will through this project. Apparently, not everyone in their government agrees. This might be a rogue faction of their government. The Eclipse Flower clearly has this rogue faction's interests. Most likely interest in the poison properties. I'm guessing. You don't mean? Only possibly that they knew about this place. Is someone talked? Either we have a spy among us, or someone higher up that knows about this project spoke when he wasn't supposed to be speaking of. What do we do now? I don't know yet, but first, let's check your shoulder. Seems like you got lucky. You just got grazed by one of the bullets from these Russian shoulders. Rose took out her first aid kit and began to clean the wound and bandage it up on her right shoulder. Shadow, gun please. As a handgun came out of Shadow's back. You had a handgun the entire time? Yes, for precautions. I work with many people, some not so good than others. Girl has to protect herself. Shadow eyes begins to flare red as the electronic sounds start to emanate from the robotic cat. Rose immediately put up the live footage of several hostile Russian soldiers trying to break through. It seems like they found us. What exactly are we going to do now? I'm going to have to kill them, of course. At least the number of threats that trying to break into my lab is manageable. If only this laboratory had an exit outside of the front entrance. As Vicky suddenly remembers something that she forgot about, actually, there is an emergency exit from this laboratory that leads to the greenhouse dome. Should have mentioned that earlier, Vicky. As Rose began to copy and wipe out all her data. What are you doing? I'm copying all my data and purging everything. If they want this data, they're going to have to rip it out of my cold, dead hands. Vicky pressed the button under one of the counters inside the laboratory as a false wall begins to open up. We should probably get going, but I need to do something first. As Rose turned to several small devices that Vicky hasn't seen before. In these small devices, there's a singular glowing crystal. As Rose blast the device on full blast. Let's go. We have less than probably 3 to 4 minutes before these devices overload and explode. What is those things, Rose? Rose closed the secret entrance behind them. It's a miniature-sized energy source using the crystals as a source of energy. I just blasted them on full power. It won't be long until the entire lab will be caught in a terrible explosion. Rose and Vicky traveled through the long, barely lit pathway. Back in the lab, when they burst through the front entrance and finally getting access to the lab after dispersing the energy barrier that stopped them. As the several devices finally hit critical mass, as it begins to overload, as a explosion was created, killing everyone inside the lab. As a loud explosion went off that everyone could hear and feel by the shake of the ground. As Rose and Vicky could hear the explosion and feel the shaking of the ground from the aftermath, as they finally made it to the exit, just right outside of the observing tower, right in the middle of the greenhouse dome, Rose saw a couple of Russian soldiers that was attacking the laboratory in the corner of her eye. Rose pulled Vicky behind one of the large trunks of the eclipse flowers. Rose looked at Vicky and placed her finger over her own lips, gesturing Vicky to remain quiet. The Russian soldiers start to walk closer and closer. As Rose was getting ready just in case they got spotted, before she could react any further, the soldiers got a call from their earpiece. As they eventually walked past the tree where Rose and Vicky are currently hiding, as Rose watched the Russian soldiers, disappear further into the forest-like eclipse flowers. Before Rose could do anything, several Japanese soldiers made themselves known, gesturing Rose and Vicky to get inside the observing tower. Once they got inside, Rose followed the Japanese soldiers to the hidden compartment that leads to the underneath of the observing tower, kind of like a safety room or a bomb shelter. Immediately when they got inside, Rose immediately noticed several other scientists and non-hostile Russian soldiers. Rose leaned against the wall to the side while Vicky was talking with everyone inside the safety room. As Rose began to check the AK-47 and the handgun, when she made sure all of the weapons were all in working order, she placed the two handguns inside Shadow's body, but kept the combat knife on her person, alongside with the AK-47. As one of the soldiers approached Rose, "I got to say, Miss Blackheart, you did well to get here. I might be a scientist, but I know how to handle a gun." I tell you, you know how to handle that rifle pretty well. My family has a military background. Can you shed any light on our situation, soldier? According to what intel we managed to overhear from the hostiles, apparently Russia having a coup d'etat, and the previous president was executed, and I'm guessing they're here to clean house. That's just great. As Rose ran her fingers through her long black hair in irritation, we clearly can't stay here for long. Do we have a way out of the country? We could always use that private jet that we used to get here in the first place, Rose. That might be our only option. I have no doubt that entire airport is locked down. At least that's what I would do, at least. We really don't have a choice. Before they could continue their conversation, the grounds began to shake, making it hard for everyone to keep their feet on the ground, as Rose supported herself by placing her hand on the wall. Vicky managed to do the same, as she grabbed a firm grip onto Rose's shoulder, trying to stabilize herself from falling. The ground begins to crack, and the crack was quite large. Between the cracks, all Rose could see a bright green color emanated from the depths. We need to investigate exactly what's going on. Judging how powerful that earthquake was, we needed to see the extent of the damage outside. I'll be back. You soldier, follow. Be careful, Rose. I will. As Rose begins to leave from the safe room of the observing tower, with one of the Japanese soldiers following her close behind, as Rose allowed the Japanese soldier to take point. Once they made it to the ground level of the tower, they immediately spotted multiple hostiles. The Japanese soldier and Rose immediately acted as they both sneak behind their own hostile Russian soldier. In the same sequence, both of them slit the throats of the hostiles. Rose covered the man's mouth as she slid the combat knife against his throat, then repeatedly just stabbed the same combat knife into his chest. The moment they got spotted, Rose pushed the dead body to the side as it fell to the ground dead, as she immediately opened fire using the AK-47, making all the Russian soldiers in line of sight to spread out, while the Japanese soldier that accompanied Rose used his own rifle to kill several of the hostile Russian soldiers. One of the hostiles threw a grenade, as Rose kicked the grenade in midair, sending it back as it landed right in front of the person who threw it. As the grenade went off, several soldiers Russian soldiers were injured from the explosion of the grenade. Not everyone, but it was enough. Rose began to gun them down. When the last one fell, once all the hostiles were dead, they began to collect what ammunition they could, as they both went towards the nearest window to see the entire greenhouse dome was in a very deep pit. Only thing that Rose could see is a bright green color coming from the depths of the pit. But the eclipse flowers were just fine. The trunks of the flowers were coming directly from the glowing green pit. Rose began to look at the other window to see the same thing. Only land that was be able to see inside the greenhouse dome was a narrow pathway. And she saw another narrow pathway on the opposite side, leading to the exit of the greenhouse. As Rose spotted a large amount of ground forces from the hostile Russians making their way towards the observing tower. Crap. That firefight we had must have alerted them. Get everyone moving out. We can't stay here any longer. We can't repel such a large number. Right away, once the soldier left and came back with everyone, Rose began to explain the situation. As they have to take turns to travel through the narrow pathway, the only ground that's left inside the greenhouse dome. Vicky and Rose watch each person make their way walking down the narrow pathway. The slightest wrong move, they will fall into the pit, and that would be instant death. One by one, everyone managed to cross safely. Shouldn't you go ahead of me? It's best if you go ahead. Are you sure? Yes, I'm sure, Vicky. I have a weapon, so I'm positive. Vicky was in the process of crossing the narrow pathway. That's when the hostile Russians started to appear and open fire, trying to stop them from crossing. Rose returned fire, forcing the Russian soldiers to take cover. As suddenly the large part of the narrow pathway began to crumble, leaving a huge gap, making it impossible for Rose to cross. As Vicky called out Rose, "Just go," as Rose shouted back. After hesitating for a few seconds, Vicky left with the rest of the group. So this is how it is. As Rose spun around and opened fire once again, killing multiple Russian soldiers that was close enough in her firing range. Rose continued firing as her magazine became empty. Rose threw the empty magazine to the side and loaded up a fresh, full magazine into the AK-47. As several bullets started to fly towards Rose, as Rose got hit in her right shoulder, Rose grind her teeth and returned fire. "Surrender, Rose Blackheart. You're surrounded. You don't have to die here. We have orders to capture you alive, but if you resist, we will put you down." "Not happening, bastards," as she immediately returned fire, only for her to hit several more times, as several bullets began to pierce her body, as Rose coughed up blood. As she returned fire, she already knows she's dead, but she's gonna make them pay. She's gonna make them fight for it. As she returned fire until she ran out of ammunition, and she threw the rifle to the side. One of the Russian soldiers managed to get close enough to charge at Rose. "Shadow gun," as she called out, as Shadow's back begins to open up, as a gun pop out of the robotic cat's back, as Rose caught both guns in midair and barely managed to duck under the attempt to the man trying to grab her. As she shot the man in the kneecap, then she shot the other gun in the skull, or opened fire directly in the skull of the man, killing him instantly. At this point, the Russian soldiers is no longer wanting to capture her alive. They immediately opened fire, as waves and waves of bullets begin to pierce Rose's body. As she's already losing too much blood, her visions become blurry. Rose eventually lost consciousness as the guns dropped from her hands, fall down in a narrow pathway as she fell into the pit. Rose was unconscious. Well, if Rose wasn't unconscious, she would be wondering how deep the pit really is. And if she was, she wouldn't be able to see anything. because of the bright green light that immediately engulfed her. The deeper she got, the brighter the light became. As a singular eclipse flower caught her fall, as she landed right in the middle of the flower, as the petal of the eclipse flower begins to close, as the eclipse flower started to sink down, going further into the pit, Rose eventually died because of blood loss. As we change the scene to the DC Universe, it's been several months since the death in Revival of Poison Ivy, after her last attempt to eradicate all human on the planet. After her revival, she isolated herself in one of her gardens away from civilization, realizing, after time, she crossed the line. Because she took it too far, that was the cause of her death. Because of her rival, or her revival, a small piece of poison ivy remained in the green. As 4 months has passed, as a singular familiar flower appeared in a forest-like swamp that's near the Swamp Thing's territory, as a singular eclipse flower appeared, inside that flower is the remaining essence of poison ivy. Over time, the flower got bigger as the essence of poison ivy went through a drastic change, forming into a new entity, a new living creature. But instead of Rose's soul consuming the soul of this entity, the two souls started to merge with each other, making Rose a brand new entity. As the eclipse flower slowly begins to bloom, revealing a 5-year-old redhead girl. When she opened her eyes, she has a bright green tint to it. It's an emerald green eyes. Once Rose opened her eyes, she stood up and began to stretch, yawning. She didn't even question the fact that she's wearing a white dress, because Rose is basically a blank slate. She did not question why she woke up in the middle of a black flower. Or did she question her clothes? Everything else is brand new to her. As Rose was suddenly assaulted by several memories of her past life as Rose Blackheart. From memories to knowledge, Rose grabbed onto her head as intake of new information assaulted her mind, as it was extremely painful for Rose. Just from her discomfort and pain, several black spike vines burst from the ground all around Rose and began to lash out at anything that got too close. Trees were obliterated from the impact of vines, cutting right through them. As soon as the aggressive spike vines appeared, as they eventually were aggressive, then they eventually settled down. As Rose's hair was covering her eyes, only keeping the bottom part of her face visible. As the black vine slowly begins to recede back into the earth, as the pain receded from Rose's mind, she's trying to adjust to all the newfound memories of a person she doesn't recognize, and the new knowledge that came alongside it, that was shoved into her mind forcibly. Rose eventually fell unconscious, still inside the middle of the rose flower, of the eclipse flower. The eclipse flower slowly began to close back up, concealing Rose inside. The eclipse flower stayed like that for several days, until the petal of the flowers began to extend outwards, blooming once again. As Rose is still peaceful slumber, after 40 minutes, Rose began to stir, as she let out a yawn, as she stretched out with her hands in the air, as she noticed several of her black vines carrying all types of fruit, and place it right next to her. Even though Rose doesn't need to eat, she can live off of the light. Rose didn't question it. She begins to eat. With some memories of her past life, she knew exactly what type of fruit that this is, or different type of fruits they are. So she calmly unwrapped the banana and started to eat it. After that, she got done with the banana. She ate a couple of apples. After she finished, the apple core in her hands began to erode away from Rose's poison. That will affect anything that makes direct skin contact with her. Rose already knows how to use her abilities to a certain level that she has access to. There's several powers she has that she's unaware of. She's nowhere near in terms of skill when it comes to her powers that she had access to that has quite similar to poison ivy's. After all, Rose is only about, technically, in appearance, she looks around 4, but in terms of age, she's barely even 1 years old. Even if she's quite young, the poison that Rose produces from her skin is extremely dangerous and deadly. Rose was self-consciously stopping her poison from affecting the food that she was eating earlier. Rose has no control on whatsoever when it comes to her deadly poison. Of course, Rose doesn't have access to all of her abilities. Some abilities are still dormant. As several black vines wrap around Rose's waist and gently lift her up in the middle of the air and lower her to the ground level. As the eclipse flower petals begin to close up and begin to sink into the ground, Rose began to walk in a random direction. She wasn't paying attention. If anyone saw her, they would be quite surprised to see a little girl who is currently walking on water of the swamp like it's solid ground. Rose completely ignored all the other alligators in the water as she continued to walk on top of the water. The alligator, sensing the danger from the small little girl, they gave her a wide berth, a very wide pathway, not wanting them to get themselves killed. Rose heard the sounds of a couple of speedboats traveling through the swamp. Rose briefly got a glimpse of the speedboat. Each speedboat had 4 people wearing some sort of mask, transporting some sort of large crates. That immediately got Rose's interest. She was just curious. Everything's brand new to her. So she chose to follow. She could sense their life signatures. As long as they're in the swamp, there's nowhere they could travel that she can't find. Outside of the swamp, it'll be a lot more difficult for her to track down someone, specifically, because of the lack of nature. But it's still possible. All about effort that Rose has wanted to put into this ability of hers. But Rose eventually caught up with the strange looking people as she watched them park their speedboats on a harbor of a old rundown manor right in the middle of the swamp. Rose immediately noticed the strange looking people that were wearing masks that you see in wrestling in Mexico, unloading all the crates and begin to move them in the large garage or barn next to the manor. Next to the docks, there's several other speedboats parked with all sorts of goons, the goons of Bane, henchmen, all carrying assault rifles. Rose watched something emerge from the water as Killer Croc lift himself up from the water, from the wooden pier. Rose watched from the distance as the crocodile man begins to talk with a much larger man with a different mask. You know the deal. Yeah, I got you, Bane. I guard this place for a few days. I get paid. You better not screw me. Because if you do, I'll fucking eat you. Don't worry, Killer Croc. You'll get your money once the job is done. I can't stay here for long. I would rather keep off the radar. The bat's radar. As Bane took one of the speedboats and left with a couple of his men, while the rest stay on location, Rose continued to watch without approaching them. She was curious, but she had no desire to reveal herself. Rose heard noises coming from the air, from the sky, as an unknown metal object she doesn't recognize, as a bat plane or jet, or depending on what you want to call it, the bat plane or the bat jet. I'll just call it the bat jet because I like it better than the bat plane personally, but that's just me. Anyways, let's continue forward. As the bat jet flew closer, hovering above Killer Croc and the rest of the goons of Bane. A singular person dropped from the bat jet. As soon as Batman landed right in front of the manor, Bruce slammed several smoke bombs onto the ground. Batman's eye holes of his cowl or whatever glow bright red as Batman immediately charged towards the nearest goon as Bruce slammed his elbow into the gunman's arm that's holding the rifle, as there was a loud crunch noise as the goon immediately dropped the rifle, as Bruce finished off the gunman by grabbing his face and slamming his knee into his face repeatedly, as the goon fell back to the ground unconscious, as Batman took out several batarangs and threw them, as 3 of the goons were hit as they dropped their weapons from their hand, from the batarangs hitting their hands that were holding the weapons. Batman easily took out the next goon by landing several left and right hooks. Then he slammed his knee into the goon's stomach, then palm uppercut him underneath his chin as the goon was lifted up in the air and land on the ground, completely knocked out. Before Bruce can continue his onslaught, a henchman of Bane. Before Bruce can continue taking out the henchman of Bane, Killer Croc came charging through the smoke, forcing Batman to leap backwards to get some distance. "You should have stayed in your sewers, Killer Croc. I'm taking you down." "This is not the time and place, Bats. But it doesn't matter. You're a dead man. You just don't know it yet." One of the henchmen of Bane appeared right behind Batman, ready to swing his metal bat at the back of his skull, only for Batman to elbow the man in the face, knocking him out without even looking behind him. Bruce kept his singular focus on Killer Croc. By now, Killer Croc has a massive crocodile grin on his face, showing Bruce all of his sharp teeth. As Killer Croc growled, ready to lunge forward. This whole time Rose was watching everything like she's watching the most entertaining thing, like it's a new TV show, even though she doesn't know exactly what a TV show is. In her past life, Rose was never much for television. She was more of a reader. So the current Rose is extremely enjoying herself. She's never seen anything like this before. She dare not miss a single moment of whatever she's watching. And that's where we're going to stop it. I'll catch you guys in the next part.